Chapter 1771, Exchange. All right, we'll do our best, Tang Wuling agreed. Guanzi continued. According to our estimates, it'll take around 10 more days to gather all of our forces, and the defensive line is already being fortified. Once everyone arrives, we'll initiate an attack. Sect Master Tang, is there a limit to the amount of life energy from abyssal creatures that you can convert? If we attack the abyssal creatures on a large scale, will some of their life energy be able to escape? It was clear from Guanzi's words that he was preparing to unleash some large-scale destructive weapons. Tang Wuling replied, I don't know where my current limits lie, but there shouldn't be any issues. The secondary tree of life is a part of our Douluo plane's seed of nature, and life energy is what it yearns for the most. All of the life energy absorbed by the golden dragon sphere actually goes straight to the tree of life. I only act as a bridge between the two. As such, the issue of my physical tolerance isn't relevant here, and the amount of life energy the tree of life is able to accept is virtually limitless. Guanzi replied, all right, then we'll be counting on you to work with us once the battle begins. We'll do everything in our power to keep you safe, and you don't even need to actively participate in the battle. You'll be the hero of the battle just by devouring all of the life energy from the abyssal creatures that we kill. Our objective for this battle is not just to force back the abyssal army. We want to deal the abyssal plane a heavy and permanent blow so that they never dare to invade our plane again. Tang Wuling nodded firmly in response. That's exactly what I'm hoping for as well. Rest assured, I'll do everything in my power to cooperate. The biggest advantage that the current human army had over their forefathers from 6,000 years ago was that they now possessed a way to truly chip away at the abyssal plane. Guanzi continued, we'll make sure to discuss all of our plans for the upcoming battle with you. Now that everything's said and done, I'll be taking my leave. Oh, by the way, don't forget about that suit of forward battle armor. Otherwise, I really won't be able to answer to my family. Also, if you ever decide to accept payment for your forging work, please give us primary consideration when you're choosing clients. We'll take everything you're able to forge. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face upon hearing this. Let's not talk about suits of forward battle armor like buying vegetables at a market. Guanzi chuckled. Of course I wouldn't take it so lightly. Oh, by the way, I'm good friends with your uncle teacher. We were playmates as children and have always remained close. My uncle teacher? Uncle teacher Zenhua? Tang Wuling felt as if he had been played for a fool. No wonder Guanzi was aware of his unprecedented rate of heavenly refinement. Guanzi rose to his feet and replied, that's right. I invited him to stay at our household as a long-term guest, but he turned me down. Back when your uncle teacher first entered the Blacksmith Association, we had supported him financially. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. These major families really did have important connections in all types of places. General Liu, there's something that I feel I must mention. 10 days is too long. In my opinion, it's best for us to initiate our attack as soon as possible. I can't shake this feeling that something is amiss. The abyssal plane has most likely prepared more extensively for this invasion that we envisioned. Otherwise, they wouldn't have launched a direct attack. Most importantly, we have no idea how long this abyssal passageway has been open for. A grim look appeared on Guanzi's face upon hearing this, and he nodded in response. I'll be sure to set everything into motion as quickly as possible, but I also have to remind you that I can't call all the shots in the military. There will most likely be some opposition from the chief minister of the army headquarters. He won't be directly participating in this battle, but he's responsible for overseeing all of the logistics and troop deployments. Both the Western Legion and Northwestern Legion are directly under his command, and he also has close ties with the North Sea Legion. Following Guanzi's departure, a contemplative look appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Even though Guanzi hadn't explicitly said anything, it wasn't difficult to read between the lines. The full name of the Douluo Federation Army headquarters was the Douluo Federation Military Commission, and it was overseen by the chief commissioner, also known as the chief minister. The chief commissioner held an extremely important position in the Federation, and they were ranked alongside Guanzi and Chen Zhenji as the three leading figures of the federal military. In the wake of the scandal where Chen Zhenji had leaked the location of Eternal Heaven to the Tang sect and resigned from his duties, the original trio was reduced to only two. Even though Chen Zhenji had decided to return, he would be in a different situation from before. During his departure, many people representing different powers had been planted into the forces that he commanded. Most importantly, Tang Wuling could tell from Guanzi's words that he wasn't one among the trio supporting the Spirit Pagoda, and that clearly also applied to Chen Zhenji, so that left only the chief commissioner. Furthermore, Guanzi had specifically pointed out the fact that this chief commissioner held considerable influence in 3 of the 8 major legions, which meant that all 3 of those legions were supporters of the Spirit Pagoda. Tang Wuling couldn't help but heave a forlorn eternal sigh. An opportunity had finally come around for them to exact their revenge on the Spirit Pagoda in an open manner, and under those circumstances, the supporters of the Spirit Pagoda wouldn't have been able to step in. However, this opportunity was ruined by the sudden invasion of the abyssal army. Regardless of what the outcome of this battle was, it would be very difficult to find another opportunity as good as that one in the future. If the human army were to lose, then nothing else would be relevant, as the entire Douluo continent would cease to exist. Even if victory was secured, the Spirit Pagoda would be widely praised for its involvement in the resistance effort, and with the support of members of the top brass in the military, it wouldn't be difficult for them to earn some accolades. Once that happened, Shrek Academy would come under enormous pressure from public opinion if it were to attack the Spirit Pagoda again. Tang Wuling didn't care about what happened to himself, but he had to think for Shrek Academy and the Tang sect. It had to be said that the Spirit Pagoda was truly extremely fortunate. If he could go back in time, perhaps he would have gone through with the revenge operation on that day. A series of military vehicles were racing along the highway, and the nearby highway entrances had all been temporarily shut with general scheduled repairs being the reason provided. In order to avoid raising widespread panic, the Federation had already taken control of the media to keep all information about the Northern Front strictly confidential. Thus, even those working in the media with extensive connections were only aware that the Federation was currently mobilizing a large number of troops. This had happened in the recent past on 2 separate occasions, namely during the Federation's 2 attempts to instigate a war against the other 2 continents, so the media was already accustomed to this. There were many people speculating in secret that the Federation was about to launch an invasion on the other 2 continents again, which was why information regarding the mobilization of troops was being kept strictly confidential. Everything was still peaceful and harmonious on the continent. The vast majority of the general was excited by the prospect of the Federation declaring war on the other 2 continents, as in their eyes, the Federation had always been the most powerful entity on this entire planet. At this moment, there was a group of people seated in a large military vehicle. The interior of the military vehicle was very lavish with a comfortable round sectional couch, as well as a table and a bathroom. At the very front of the vehicle, there was even a bed that one could rest on situated above the driver's cabin, and the vehicle could comfortably house close to 20 people at a time. At this moment, there weren't many people in the vehicle. Dou Yuno was in a crisp white military uniform, adding a sense of dashing sharpness to her stunning beauty. Her military uniform perfectly accentuated her gorgeous figure, and her silver hair was arranged in a long ponytail that trailed down her back. On her shoulders sat a pair of Major General epaulets. There were also several other people in the vehicle, one of whom was Kyangyu's Hanting, who was lying on the bed in a deep sleep with a content smile on his face. Chapter 1772, Dou Yuno's plan. Dou Yuno was seated on the couch with her eyes closed, but judging from her occasionally fluttering eyelashes, it was clear that she wasn't sleeping or meditating. Instead, she seemed to be in deep thought about something. There were several other people seated beside her, one of which was a man with a head of long black hair, punctuated by a single thin line of golden hair. This man wore a pair of senior colonel epaulets, and he was accompanied by several other figures of different descriptions. My lord, are we really going to help the humans combat the abyss? The black-haired man asked. Dou Yuno's eyes remained shut as she replied, we have no choice. If the Douluo continent ceases to exist, where will we reside? I've come into contact with the abyssal plane in the past, and those abyssal creatures are extremely formidable. They're 100 times more greedy than humans, and they can devour all types of life energy, so we can't let them claim this plane no matter what. For us and the human race, they are a common enemy. Besides, this is also an opportunity for us. During the Dragon God's evolution, he fashioned the silver dragon spear, and the golden dragon spear from 2 of his ribs. The golden dragon spear isn't the only one capable of devouring abyssal life energy. The abyssal plane is superior to the Douluo plane, so if I can devour sufficient life energy from that plane, perhaps I would be able to recover some of the Dragon God's powers. The black-haired man hesitated momentarily before replying, this is indeed a good opportunity. If you can devour Tang Wuling as well, I'm sure you'll be able to return to your form as the Dragon God. Once that time comes, the human humans will be at our mercy, so we can't afford to let this opportunity slip. Guyuna finally opened her eyes upon hearing this, and she turned to the black-haired man with an intense gaze. Do I need you to tell me what to do? A wry smile appeared on the black-haired man's face as he shook his head in response. I don't know if it's in my place to say this, but you're far too indecisive when it comes to Tang Wulin, my lord. If you don't become more decisive in this matter, you run the risk of suffering unforeseen consequences. Tang Wulin's rate of growth has already exceeded our projections, and he's gathering more and more powerful allies. Even I don't have full confidence in my ability to take him down now. The Golden Dragon King has inherited the Dragon God's body and all of its negative emotions. Once he completely assimilates himself with the Golden Dragon King's power, even you most likely won't be able to stop him, and the world will be plunged into a massive disaster. Guyuna took an indifferent glance at him and said, isn't that exactly what you're hoping for? The vast majority of the inhabitants of this world are humans, so even if a disaster were to arise, the human race would suffer the most. The black-haired man faltered slightly upon hearing this. My lord. Guyuna waved a dismissive hand to cut him off. That's enough. I've already decided on a plan, and the Dragon God will be sure to return. An unfathomable look appeared in her eyes as she spoke, and her emotions had been swayed by the black-haired man in the slightest. Through her expression, the ones around her could clearly see her determination, and the black-haired man didn't say anything further as he knew that no words would be able to change Guyuna's mind in her current state. Guyuna closed her eyes again, and the image of him involuntarily surfaced in her mind. On that day, they had been in very close proximity with one another, and a type of pain she had never experienced welled up in her heart at the sight of his expression. His eyes were filled with sorrow and yearning, as if they were asking her why they couldn't be together. Perhaps he had already figured some things out for himself. In the past, she could make the excuse that he wasn't powerful enough, but now, he had become a truly formidable soul master, and with the Tang sect and Shrek Academy behind him, there was no one who could match him in this world. What other excuse did she have? Even so, she couldn't return to his side as it simply wasn't possible for her current self. Wulin, I've already made up my mind. No matter how much you resent me for it, I can't change anything because this is the only plan that I can think of. After all, I'm the Silver Dragon King, someone destined to stand against you. Perhaps it would be best for everyone if my plan came into fruition. Wulin, I really want to be with you, to constantly be by your side. Guyuna reflexively pursed her lips as her hands balled up into tight fists. It wouldn't be long before she would be able to see him again. At the very least, would she finally be able to fight alongside him in the battle against the Abyssal Army? Perhaps that would be their final close interaction and the last time they would fight together. All she could do now was cherish every single day to come. At the very least, it would still be some time before her plan would be set into motion. Regardless of what the final outcome of her plan's implementation would be, she would still be able to interact closely with him prior to that. The Abyssal Army was far more peaceful than one would imagine. As more and more federal troops arrived on the northern front, the chances of suffering a sneak attack from the Abyssal Army dwindled further and further. The East Sea Legion and Sea God Legion arrived one after the other, walking down the entire coastline alongside the North Sea Legion. On land, the Central Legion, Western Legion, and Northwestern Legion had already joined up with what remained of the Northern Legion, and the only ones yet to arrive were the troops from the Southern Legion, which was simply situated too far away. In addition to that, even the Commander-in-Chief of the Blood God Legion, Jiang Wanyun, had arrived with an elite group of troops. The group wasn't very large, but all of its members were elite soldiers with extensive experience in battling abyssal creatures. The Blood God Legion had come into contact with the abyssal plane the most by far, so they were undoubtedly going to be able to provide the most experience to everyone else. Tang Wulin and his group were situated on the same mountain where the secondary tree of life was growing. The secondary tree of life was thriving, and it could already be seen from very far away. Even if one couldn't sense its aura, just the mere sight of it instilled within one a sense of peace and serenity. The secondary tree of life seemed to have become the backbone of the entire human army. The Central Legion was stationed around this mountain, and the most powerful defensive soul tools had been set up nearby. Guanzi had stayed true to his promise, making every effort to contribute to the defense of the secondary tree of life. With the arrival of the other legions and the constant influx of resources, it could be said that virtually all of the military power of the entire Federation had been gathered in this place. Powerful beings were also constantly arriving from the Battle God Hall, the Spirit Pagoda, and other major Soulmaster organizations, forming perhaps the most formidable army to ever be assembled on the Douluo continent. A temporary control center had been constructed at the center of the Central Legion's encampment, and at this moment, a lively and bustling scene was unfolding inside the control center. The conference table in the control center was over 10 meters tall and could seat over 30 people at once. At this moment, all of the seats had been filled by the top-ranking officials of the Federation, and many major generals, even lieutenant generals, would only stand. Two people were seated beside one another at the head of the table, one of which was an admiral, while the other was a general. They were none other than Boundless Ocean Douluo Chenzinji and Divine Brush Douluo Uguanzi. Two of the three leading figures of the military had arrived, and both of them were Limit Douluo. On their left-hand side sat the representatives from all of the major Soulmaster organizations, headed by the representative of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, Dragon Emperor Douluo Tang Wulin. He was the only one from Shrek Academy and the Tang sect to be seated at this table, but there were four others standing not far behind him. Chapter 1773, the Western Legion and the Northwestern Legion. These four were Yuan and Zenshin, Yuan and Tiandang, Healing Douluo Tongyu, and Amorous Douluo Zhangxin. That's right, there were four Limit Douluo present. Just as the Heartless Douluo had stipulated prior to their departure, Tang Wulin had to constantly have at least four Limit Douluo around him wherever he was on the front lines. Of course, Tang Wulin's arrival at the control center with the four Limit Douluo instantly drew everyone's attention. Limit Douluos were obviously entitled to seats on the conference table, but the four of them chose to stand behind Tang Wulin, completely ignoring the attention directed toward them. Only Zhangxin was extending some greetings to some of the people he was familiar with. Seated right beside Tang Wulin was Sky-Crossing Douluo Guanyue, the new Battle God Hall Master, and after that came Spirit Pagoda Chairman Kyangu Dongfang, who was missing an arm. On the surface, it didn't look as if Kyangu Dongfang held any hatred toward Tang Wulin at all. He was very calm and collected, as if nothing here had anything to do with him, and his composure was a clear testament to his shrewd nature. The next person after him was actually also from Shrek Academy. It was Body Douluo Arahang. Mu Yi had also arrived not long ago, but he had already officially passed the title of Body Sect Master onto Arahang, so he was naturally acting as the Body Sect representative. At the Battle God Hall, Arahang had already proven his power with the display of his invincible Vajra body, so the Body Sect was ranked only below the Spirit Pagoda as the fifth most powerful Soulmaster organization. It could be said that this was the first time the Body Sect had risen to such heights in the past 1,000 years. The Yuan family would have also been granted a seat at the table, but Yuan and Zenshin insisted that the Yuan family was part of Shrek Academy, so there would be no independent representative from the family present. Following Arahang came the leaders of the rest of the major Soulmaster organizations, many of which had existed for many years and had a high level of influence and renown. For example, there was the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan, whose young master Tang Wulin had once impersonated, and the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile Pagoda clan, which was renowned for possessing the number one assistant system martial soul on the continent. After that came a family that drew Tang Wulin's attention as in a sense, he shared a deep connection with this family. This was a sect by the name of the Clear Sky Sect. The Clear Sky Sect's master was a middle-aged man in his 40s, and Tang Wulin's heart had been given a massive jolt at the sight of his arrival. The Clear Sky Sect was the sect that Tang San's father had hailed from, and it was ranked alongside the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan and Seven Treasure Glazed Tile Pagoda clan as the three major clans. All three were among the oldest clans to exist in the Soulmaster world, existing even before the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. They were the most powerful clans during the generation of the Spirit Hall, when Tang San had forged his legacy, and many major clans from the same time period had gradually fallen into obscurity or even disappeared altogether. So it was a clear testament to these three clans that they continued to exist and be relevant. However, the three clans were suffering from the same issue as the Body Sect, which was that no Limit Douluos had appeared among their ranks for many years, thereby naturally causing them to fall into gradual decline. Even so, Tang Wulin couldn't help but be struck by a sense of closeness upon seeing the Clear Sky Sect's master. Both Tang San and Tang Hao, and even his father, Tang Chen, hailed from this clan, and the Clear Sky Hammer of the Clear Sky Sect was renowned as the most powerful assault system tool martial soul of that era. It was also one of Tang San's two martial souls. It was just a pity that Tang Wulin had only inherited the blue-silver Emperor martial soul from Tang San. On the right side of the table was a dazzling collection of epaulets. Even Northern Legion Commander Go's Henfeng could only sit at the very end of the table on that side. This was simply unavoidable as he possessed the least experience and the Northern Legion was the weakest of the 8 major legions. Seated in the first position on the right side was an elderly man who was also wearing general epaulets. He had a very fierce appearance with dark skin and a pair of large, piercing eyes, creating a very menacing package to behold. The fact that he was situated in the first seat on the right side undoubtedly indicated that his status was below only Chen Zhenji and Guanzi. He was currently seated across from Tang Wulin, appraising Tang Wulin with a fierce look in his eyes. This was the commander-in-chief of the Western Legion, Dong Xian. He was also a leading figure in the military, and had once been renowned as the most fierce warrior in the military. His martial soul was the Azure Face Wolf, and he was a limit Douluo with the Douluo title of Fierce Wolf. The Azure Face Wolf was actually only a very ordinary type of martial soul, which was exactly why Dong Xian was so renowned in the military. It was common knowledge that the higher the caliber of one's martial soul, the greater the chance they had to cultivate to a high level. For someone to have cultivated an ordinary martial soul like the Azure Face Wolf to the limit Douluo level undoubtedly entailed an extremely arduous cultivation journey, and there had to have been a mutation at some point. Otherwise, there was no way that the Azure Face Wolf could be cultivated to the limit Douluo level. The Western Legion was extremely powerful, second only to the Central Legion among the Federal military's ground forces. The Legion was situated on the western frontier, and it could be said that it was the backup to the Blood God Legion. If any issues occurred while the Blood God Legion was guarding the abyssal passageway, the first forces to reinforce them would be from the Western Legion. Dong Xian appeared to be quite advanced in age, but he was actually only in his 60s, and had long been regarded as Chen Zhenji's successor. There was a very good chance that he would also take up a role in the Battle God Hall in the future alongside his military duties. Seated next to him was someone very familiar to Tang Wulin. It was Miradillo Zhang Wanyun. After that came the commander-in-chief of the Northwestern Legion, a refined middle-aged man who was constantly smiling and was also a general. He struck the beholder as someone who was very placid and easygoing, but all those familiar with him knew that he was as cunning as a fox and was renowned as the leading strategist in the military. He had commanded the Northwestern Legion for many years, and during that time, the Legion had been on a steady rise. The Central Legion, Northwestern Legion, and Western Legion were regarded as the 3 premier army legions of the Federation, while the Sea God Legion, East Sea Legion, and North Sea Legion comprised the 3 premier naval legions. In contrast, the Southern Legion and Northern Legion were relatively weaker. The Northern Legion was situated in the northernmost region of the continent, and there was nothing much to defend against here, and due to its remote location, it was very difficult to transport resources here, so no elite soldiers wanted to come here. As for the Southern Legion, it was together with the Sea God Legion, so it naturally couldn't grow too powerful and outstrip the Sea God Legion. After all, among all of the 8 major legions, the Southern Legion was the only family-run legion, and under extreme circumstances, the Holy Angel Clan's orders were even more effective than those from the army headquarters, so it naturally received the less resources from the Federation. If the 8 legions had to be ranked in descending order of strength, then it would look something like Central Legion, Western Legion, East Sea Legion, North Sea Legion, Southern Legion, and Northern Legion. The commander-in-chief of the Northwestern Legion was named Jin Moshang, and he was a hyper Douluo with the Silver Frost Halberd martial soul. He wasn't a limit Douluo, but the Northwestern Legion was ranked among the top 3 legions of the Federation, so he was granted a seat right after Zhang Wanyun. Following him came another familiar face in the form of Heartless Douluo Cao Daja. He was currently wearing his general uniform, and was representing the Blood God Battalion of the Blood God Legion rather than the Tang sect. Only after Cao Daja came Go's Henfeng, and after him came the higher-ups of the important military departments, such as those overseeing logistics and reconnaissance. It was no exaggeration to say that the most powerful beings of the Douluo Federation and the top brass of the military were gathered here on this day. There were over 10 limit Douluo in this conference hall, and this was an extremely rare sight even in the Douluo Federation. Chapter 1774, Military Conference. Standing around the table were many other high-ranking officials of the military, as well as representatives from other major powers, and someone had been quite displeased by the fact they hadn't been granted seats, but no one had objections after sensing the auras of the 4 limit Douluo standing behind Tang Wulin. Even limit Douluos were standing. Who would dare to say anything? Following the battle against the Spirit Pagoda, everyone knew that Shrek Academy and the Tang sect had already returned to the height of their powers. Guanzi took a glance at Chen Zhenji, and the latter gave him a nod. Thus, Guanzi cleared his throat, and the entire conference hall quickly settled down. Guanzi turned toward the representatives of the major Soul Master organizations on his left, and said, "Firstly, I'd like to welcome the representatives of the major Soul Master organizations on behalf of the military. It is very encouraging to have your assistance against this formidable enemy during the continent's time of need." The representatives all nodded in acknowledgement. Guanzi continued, "I'm sure everyone has already seen the information regarding the abyssal plane. The enemies are far more powerful than what we had imagined, and even I'm only seeing enemies of this nature for the first time in my life. The information that we have stems from the battle against the abyssal plane 6,000 years ago, as well as the experience accrued by the Blood God Legion over the past 6,000 years. Before we get into anything else, I would like to give the Northern Legion its due praise on behalf of the army headquarters. During the initial clash, over 60,000 of the Northern Legion's troops perished, and Commander Go himself led from the front, coming very close to losing his own life in the battle. Despite being completely unfamiliar with these enemies, they defended the Northern front with their lives and didn't take a single backward step. Their spirit is something that all of us can learn from. The army headquarters has already penned down the Northern Legion to receive huge accolades at the conclusion of this battle. Guanzi's words were delivered in a very rousing fashion, while Go's Henfeng was struggling to hold back his tears. The 60,000 troops who had perished had all been brothers of his. Commander Go, I would like to thank you on behalf of the army headquarters. Guanzi rose to his feet as he spoke before extending a military salute toward Go's Henfeng. Go's Henfeng also rose to his feet to return the salute, and he said, "Commander, I don't need any personal rewards. Please allocate the reward meant for me to the families of my fallen brothers. They deserve all of the honor for their sacrifice." Go's Henfeng was finally unable to hold back his tears any longer as he spoke. "I will. Our soldiers are bleeding on the front lines. The Federation definitely won't allow their families to suffer, but I can guarantee you." Guanzi bowed with a serious expression. "Thank you, Commander." The two of them returned to their seats, and Guanzi continued, "Almost all of our troops have already arrived on the Northern Front, and the Southern Legion is also due to arrive in a few days. We can't wait any longer as we have no idea how many powerful beings of the abyssal plane have currently arrived on our Douluo continent. We must do everything in our power to wipe them out once and for all in a single battle." He paused here momentarily before turning his gaze toward Tang Wulin. "I'm sure everyone has already seen footage of the latest battle. Sect Master Tang's Golden Dragon is currently the only weapon we have that can inflict substantial damage upon the abyssal plane. Compared with our forefathers from 6,000 years ago, we are very fortunate as at the very least, we possess the ability to truly chip away at the enemy. Hence, I propose that we make Sect Master Tang the core of our resistance so we can weaken the abyssal plane while forcing back the abyssal army. If there are no objections to this, then I'll move on to elaborate on our specific strategy now." There was no way to hide the fact that the Golden Dragon spear could devour abyssal energy, nor any incentive to do so as it was the most powerful weapon the Federation had against the abyssal plane. Tang Wulin was more than happy to adopt this responsibility, and this was also a good opportunity for the Tree of Life. Furthermore, so many powerful beings from the Tang sect and Shrek Academy had arrived, and they would be enough to keep him safe. Aside from the Holy Lord himself, even the top-ranked sovereigns of the abyssal plane would find it very difficult to harm Tang Wulin. After all, he had the protection of the limit Douluos and the secondary Tree of Life. Just as Guanzi was about to begin explaining the battle strategy, a voice of dissension suddenly rang out. "Hold on." Everyone turned toward the direction the voice had come from to find that it was Kaiangyu Dongfang who had spoken. Guanzi's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. "Do you have some different opinions, Chairman Kaiangyu? I have to remind you that we are in the midst of a battle for the continent's survival, so everyone here must set aside all personal differences. If anyone's individual actions produce a negative effect on this battle, then they could be directly contributing to the downfall of the entire Federation." Kaiangyu Dongfang smiled and replied, "Don't be so quick to jump to conclusions, Commander. You invited everyone here for this conference, so there has to be a discussion process, right? You can't just not let anyone speak." "Go ahead then, Chairman Kaiangyu," Guanzi prompted. Kaiangyu Dongfang continued, "I have no objections to the overall plan, and I'm of course in support of acting right away to end this battle as soon as possible. However, I think it's an exaggeration to say that Tang Wulin is the sole core of this resistance effort. Isn't that implying that if something were to happen to him, the entire battle would be lost?" "Oh. What do you propose then, Chairman Kaiangyu?" Guanzi asked in a calm manner. Despite his placid appearance, all those who were familiar with him knew that the calmer he appeared, the fouler his mood was. Kayangyu Dongfang smiled and replied, aside from Sect Master Tang, our spirit pagoda also possesses a divine weapon capable of devouring abyssal energy, and that's the main supporting reason behind my objection. A slight stir ran through the entire conference hall upon hearing this, and a hint of surprise appeared on Tang Wulin's face as well. The spirit pagoda also had such a divine weapon. In that case, why didn't they bring it out 6,000 years ago? He turned to Kayangyu Dongfang with a hint of surprise in his eyes, but Kayangyu Dongfang merely ignored him and continued to look straight at Guanzi. If you have proof, then this would naturally be fantastic news for us all, Guanzi said without any hesitation. Of course it was more flexible to have two cores than only one. Kayangyu Dongfang raised a hand, and someone standing not far behind him slowly strode forward. Tang Wulin turned toward that direction and immediately caught sight of this person. In reality, he had already sensed her arrival, but due to the current situation, he couldn't pay much attention to her. Gu Yuna arrived beside Kayangyu Dongfang, then raised her right hand to summon the silver dragon spear amid a flash of dazzling silver light. As soon as the spear appeared, the natural elements in the air instantly became more active and concentrated, to the point that there was even a sense of viscosity in the air. It was clear that this was a divine weapon, and Tang Wulin couldn't help but be struck by a sense of nostalgia at the sight of it. This was Naya's silver dragon spear. Ever since the change that had taken place between Gu Yue and Naya, he had always wondered what had happened to the two, and a series of violent emotional fluctuations instantly welled up in his heart at the sight of the silver dragon spear, to the point that faint mental manifestation projections were beginning to appear around him. Thankfully, he caught himself in time and immediately composed himself to prevent the memories of him spending time with Naya from being projected. Kayangyu Dongfang explained, Gu Yuna is one of the 4 spirit envoys of our spirit pagoda, and due to recent breakthrough in her cultivation, she had been promoted to become a vice chairman of our spirit pagoda. Her silver dragon spear also just so happens to be able to absorb abyssal energy, so it'll be sure to play a huge role on the battlefield. In light of that, I believe she should also be made a core of this resistance effort. Chapter 1775, Internal Clash. If anyone has seen the coverage of the Joust for a Spouse event, then you should know. Kayangyu Dongfang paused here momentarily before finally turning toward Tang Wulin with a faint smile. That Sect Master Tang was defeated by our silver dragon princess. Both of their divine weapons are able to devour abyssal energy, so shouldn't Gu Yuna receive primary consideration to become the core of this resistance effort? As soon as this statement was made, the entire conference hall immediately erupted into discussion. Tang Wulin's defeat to Gu Yuna was an undisputed fact. After all, the battle had been broadcast live for all to see. Guanzi said, this is not a statement to be made lightly. Chairman Kayangyu, are you sure this silver dragon spear is also capable of devouring abyssal energy? Kayangyu Dongfang pulled out a small soul tool and placed it onto the table, then pressed a button on it to release a 3-dimensional projection. The projection depicted a silver figure with a pair of massive silver wings that were spread open on her back, and she was wearing a suit of beautiful silver battle armor that was shimmering with rainbow light. She flashed through the sky like a bolt of silver lightning, and in the next instant, she had already speared into the abyssal army from the sky. She was unstoppable in her advance, and a huge amount of dense grey energy quickly rose up, only to be rapidly devoured by that streak of silver light. The perspective then shifted to that of the first person, and balls of rainbow light could be seen exploding incessantly from her body, killing the surrounding abyssal creatures with ruthless efficiency. From this perspective, it could be clearly seen that the grey energy was being devoured by the spear in her hand. In the next instant, she let loose a long cry and abruptly rose up into the air. From a bird's eye view, it could be clearly seen that a giant cave with a diameter in excess of 3 kilometers had appeared on the ground below. In contrast with the landscape around it, there was no snow or ice around the cave's entrance, only vast expanses of dead grey land. Countless abyssal creatures could be seen gathered down below, and a large number of high-grade abyssal creatures were already converging toward her from all directions. A dense grey mist was permeating through the sky, and a ball of bright azure light exploded behind her, releasing enormous propulsion force that almost instantly allowed her to break through the sound barrier as she sped away into the distance. Up to this point, the projection had only been playing for less than a minute, but it had displayed everything that Kayangyu Dongfang wanted to display. It was clear that the silver suit of battle armor was a suit of 4-word battle armor, and its owner was none other than the silver dragon princess, Gu Yuna. She had traveled to the abyssal passageway on her own to demonstrate the power of her silver dragon spear. Kayangyu Dongfang said in a proud manner, as everyone saw, that is the power of the silver dragon spear. I'm sure it's definitely not inferior to Sect Master Tang's golden dragon spear. On top of that, this is definitely the first piece of footage we've managed to gather of the abyssal passageway, and we were only able to secure it thanks to Gu Yuna's brave solo venture. After this meeting, I'll be submitting this piece of footage to the control center of analysis. The satellites were unable to conduct surveillance on the northernmost region of the continent as the sky had been entirely enshrouded under a layer of dense grey mist, so Kayangyu Dongfang was right to say that this is the first piece of footage of the abyssal passageway that had been captured. Some surveillance drones had been sent out to scout the area in the past, but none of them had returned, so this piece of footage was extremely valuable. This is a very precious piece of footage that will surely benefit us immensely, Dong Xian said. His voice was very strange and husky, and it was quite unpleasant to listen to. He continued, 2 cores is definitely going to be better than 1, and the current level of soul technology available to us is far superior to that from 6,000 years ago. All types of energy have their own energy structures, and abyssal energy is no exception to this. I'm not convinced that these abyssal creatures can stand up to the might of our newest technology. Zhang Wanyun's brows furrowed slightly as he objected. I'm afraid you're mistaken there, General Dong. We've tested out almost all of the Federation's cutting-edge weapons on these abyssal creatures, and up to this point, not a single one of them has been able to effectively destroy these abyssal creatures. The golden dragon spear is the only exception. During the last abyssal tide, it was Sect Master Tang and his golden dragon spear, in conjunction with the blood god array, that kept the abyssal creatures at bay and forced the holy lord into retreat. All of a sudden, a thought seemed to have occurred to him, and his gaze fell upon Gu Yuna. He suddenly recalled that she also seemed to have been present at the time. It was her who had joined forces with Tang Wulin to force back the holy lord, but he had no idea what kind of relationship she shared with Tang Wulin. It could be said that she had saved Tang Wulin's life on that occasion, and one of them possessed the golden dragon spear while the other had the silver dragon spear, so there was no way that they weren't connected in some way. At this point, Gu Yuna had already stowed away her silver dragon spear and stepped back off to the side. Dong Xian proposed, I think we should split our forces up into 2 with each side carrying one of the divine weapons. In order to accommodate this, we'll have to change our battle plan. Guanzi's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and a cold look appeared in his eyes. It was clear that Dong Xian and Kayangyu Dongfang had planned this together, as evidenced by the fact that they were only bringing up this matter now, when the human army was on the cusp of launching its assault. If we were to change the plan now, it would result in a further delay. The way I see it, we should get Sect Master Tang and Vice Chairman Dou to work together while still following the original plan, Guanzi said. Dong Xian immediately objected. Do you really think the Tang Sect and Shrek Academy will be able to genuinely work with the Spirit Pagoda? If you force them to collaborate, things could go very sour. A hint of anger appeared on Guanzi's face. This was already the second consecutive time that Dong Xian had rebuked him. As the commander-in-chief of the human army and one of the military's leading figures, Guanzi was naturally not a fan of having his authority challenged repeatedly. Dong Xian looked directly back at Guanzi with an unwavering gaze, displaying no fear at all. They had always shared a rocky relationship, where Dong Xian was quite envious of Guanzi. The Western Legion had always been ranked under the Central Legion, and in addition to that, the two of them had taken completely opposite paths to get to where they were today. Guanzi had been born with a silver spoon in his mouth, receiving the best education throughout his youth before enjoying a smooth journey to the top. In contrast, Dong Xian hailed from a completely average family, and he had to fight tooth and nail for everything he had, accumulating military accolades for decade after decade before finally becoming a Legion commander. Hence, they were essentially destined to not see eye to eye with one another. This was why Guanzi had subtly warned Tang Wulin about the Western Legion, and in doing so, he was trying to establish good relations with the Tang Sect and Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect had always been neutral entities, but even neutral powers had certain leanings. That's enough. You two are still bickering at a time like this? Chen Xinji scolded with furrowed brows. Dong Xian immediately opened his mouth to say something, but decided against it after a sharp tug on his sleeve from Yu Moshang. Chen Xinji continued. Guanzi, tell everyone your plan so we can discuss it. Not only did Chen Xinji hold the loftiest status in the military, he also had the highest level of seniority. Aside from Guan Yue, he was old enough to be the father or even grandfather of virtually all of the military officials present. If it weren't for the Eternal Heaven scandal, he would have been made the commander of the human army. Guanzi briefly composed himself and turned his gaze away from Dong Xian as he explained. This is the plan. The Sea God Legion, North Sea Legion, and East Sea Legion will deploy all of their mega divisions onto land to assist the ground units, as well as to provide additional firepower. After we ascertain the location of the Abyssal Passageway, the 3 naval legions will launch a carpet bombing on the Abyssal Army, followed by a second carpet bombing to be carried out by the Air Force units. During this process, we must protect Sect Master Tang while he situates himself on the front line so he can devour as much Abyssal energy as possible. A third carpet bombing will follow the second one, amounting to a total 3 rounds of bombing to be carried out in alternating fashion by the naval and Air Force units. After the 3 roundings of bombing, the ground units will move in to clean up the battlefield, led by the Central Legion's troops, who have been assigned heavy iron weaponry, while other legions will act as assistants. When that time comes, I implore all of the major Soulmaster organizations to also cooperate with us to hold off the powerful beings of the Abyssal Plane. Our strategy will be to keep the most powerful Abyssal creatures occupied while decimating the weaker Abyssal creatures, then target the powerful Abyssal creatures as a collective unit, doing our best to kill them before sealing the Abyssal Passageway. Chapter 1776, Finalizing the battle plan. That's the overall plan. There will be many more finer details involved in its execution, all of which have already been finalized by the General Staff, and all orders will be issued to their respective units as soon as possible. This battle plan was clearly something that had been carefully considered and well thought out. Dong Xian was very much correct in one point, which was that Soul technology was far more advanced than it had been 6,000 years ago, and there were now far more types of mass-destructive weapons available. Furthermore, virtually all of the Federal military's weaponry had been transported to this northern front, and with that much firepower available, a comprehensive carpet bombing could be maintained for 3 days and 3 nights with no issues. During this process, the most important thing wasn't to kill enemy units, but to weaken the Abyssal Army, which was why Guanzi had proposed for Tang Wuling to be present on the front lines. 6,000 years ago, the main disadvantage that the human army faced was that it was unable to truly kill the Abyssal creatures, but a solution to this problem had arisen in the form of the Golden Dragon Sphere. Guanzi continued. During this entire battle, the key will be Sect Master's Golden Dragon Sphere, and the ones most familiar with Sect Master Tang are those from the Tang Sect and Shrek Academy. So I would like to ask the limit Douluos of the Tang Sect and Shrek Academy to accompany and protect him. Of course, the military will also be deploying some powerful beings to accompany him as well. Tang Wuling nodded in response. Even though his mind was entirely occupied by Gyuna, he had to focus on the meeting that was currently taking place. I have no issues with this plan. Regardless of how much heavy artillery fire was deployed, it would be very difficult to harm limit Douluos unless weapons of the same caliber as Godslayer missiles were involved. This battle plan was very direct, but it was undoubtedly also going to be the most effective, and it reflected just how important the sacrifice made by the Northern Legion had been. If it weren't for the fact that the Abyssal Army had been restricted to the northernmost region of the continent, the situation would have been far more difficult to contain. Kayangyu, Dongfang suddenly interjected. Based on the results of Naya's scouting trip, the entrance to the passageway should be situated in the core circle of the northernmost region. The climate there is extremely unforgiving, so I still suggest splitting our forces up into 2 as that would give us better chances. If we launch a full frontal attack, a huge amount of Abyssal energy would be generated within a short time, and Sect Master Tang may not be able to devour all that energy on his own. Dong Xian immediately chimed in support. I'm also of the same opinion. There's nothing wrong with the overall battle plan. We just have to split the duty of devouring Abyssal energy to 2 people. Our Western Legion and the Northwestern Legion can protect Vice Chairman Gu. This was quite a reasonable suggestion, and it was undoubtedly the best practical option. Guanzi replied, in that case, we'll make some slight adjustments to the plan so we can accommodate 2 corps instead of 1. Chen Xinji suddenly said, regardless of whether we split up our troops or not, this is an extremely important battle upon which the safety of the entire continent hinges, so all personal differences must be set aside. Even if we split up, both branches must look out for one another. If anyone fails to do that, you'll have to answer to me. Dong Xian chuckled. Rest assured, we've all been serving for so many years, we know what our order of priorities should be. Chen Xinji took an indifferent glance at him. That would be best. After that came the discussion of the battle plan's finer details, and Dong Xian and Kayangyu Dongfang acted in a very cooperative manner for the rest of the meeting. However, Tang Wuling knew that they had already achieved their goal. The Western Legion and Northwestern Legion were detaching themselves from the ground units, which meant that there was a very good chance that they wouldn't follow Guanzi's orders. From Dong Xian's perspective, this would allow him to command his troops more easily and better collaborate with the Spirit Pagoda. However, from Guanzi's perspective, this was a clear signal that the 2 legions weren't going to follow his orders. This wouldn't have been a problem if Chen Xinji had been the commander-in-chief, as he was always able to repress Dong Xian. However, Dong Xian had never seen eye to eye with Guanzi, and Guanzi had already anticipated that Dong Xian would do something like this. However, thinking about it from Dong Xian's perspective, he would most likely do the same thing. No one wanted their brothers to be put under someone else's command. What if the commander instructed them to sacrifice themselves as cannon fodder? The meeting stretched on for half a day and only concluded at noon. We'll end things here for today. Make the required preparations as quickly as possible. We strike at noon tomorrow, Guanzi said with a determined expression as he rose to his feet. Noon was when the sun was at its brightest, which was when evil soul masters would be at their weakest, so it was the ideal time to be launching an attack. Thus, everyone rose to their feet with different thoughts racing through their minds. The first thing that Tang Wuling did after standing up was turn his gaze toward Gyuna, who was also currently looking at him. Tang Wuling's physical appearance hadn't changed much. With his current cultivation rank and incredible physical constitution, he wouldn't show any signs of aging for many years. The only thing that had changed about him was the look in his eyes. Looking at him at such close quarters, Gyuna could clearly sense that his eyes were more mature and profound. The emotions that he had outwardly expressed in the past were restrained, and his gaze was very placid, but Gyuna's heart still jolted as their eyes met. They were so close with one another, and countless memories instantly welled up in both of their hearts. If they weren't forcibly repressing those memories, involuntary mental manifestations would immediately surface around them. Tang Wuling heaved an internal sigh and didn't approach her. They belonged to different camps, and he didn't want to cause any trouble for her. He had already decided on his own plan, which involved putting an end to the conflict with the Spirit Pagoda once and for all following the conclusion of this war. Once that happened, he was going to take Gyuna back no matter what, even if he had to abduct her. Right at this moment, a voice that Tang Wuling utterly detested rang out. Sect Master Tang. Tang Wuling turned to find Kayangyu Dongfang standing right before him. Do you need something, Chairman Kayangyu? Tang Wuling asked in an indifferent voice. A meaningful smile appeared on Kayangyu Dongfang's face, and he replied, no, I just wanted to wish you good luck. Tang Wuling responded in kind. Then I wish the same to you as well. I hope I'll still be able to see you after this battle. After that, Tang Wuling strode directly forward, and Kayangyu Dongfang was standing right in front of him, so they were going to crash into one another unless one of them stepped aside. However, Tang Wuling completely disregarded Kayangyu Dongfang and continued onward without displaying any intention of changing directions. Kayangyu Dongfang's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and a hint of fierce killing intent flashed through his eyes. However, as Tang Wuling reached him, he still stepped aside at the last moment. Due to his momentary hesitation, he was unable to completely avoid Tang Wuling, causing Tang Wuling's shoulder to brush across his chest, leaving a stinging sensation. Tang Wuling then departed without taking so much as a single backward glance, followed by the 4 limit Douluos. Just as all 5 of them had passed Kayangyu Dongfang by, Zhang suddenly turned around with a smile and said, Chairman Kayangyu Dongfang, if I recall correctly, wasn't there a saying that goes a good dog doesn't get in the way of others? Haha. After that, Zhang Xin also departed, leaving Kayangyu Dongfang to look on with a murderous expression and tightly clenched fists. Gyuna arrived by his side with a concerned expression and asked, are you all right, Chairman? Kayangyu Dongfang took a deep breath to compose himself before replying, I'm fine. We'll let them laugh while they still can. Let's go. Looking on at Tang Wulin's departing figure, his heart was actually filled with remorse. It could be said that he had bore witness to every step of Tang Wulin's meteoric rise to the top. Chapter 1777, Long Yakshu's arrival. Initially, he had paid Tang Wulin no heed, but that had gradually changed as he discovered that Tang Wulin was developing rapidly out of his control. Now, this young man who was only in his 20s was superior to him in both power and status. All of these changes seemed to have taken place in a very short time, and Kyanqu Dongfang was finding it very difficult to accept this. If he were given another chance, he would ensure that Tang Wulin was killed at all costs. Without a leader and a divine blacksmith in the form of Tang Wulin, there was no way that Shrek Academy would have risen up again so quickly. Tang Wulin returned to his barracks near the secondary tree of life, which was a very plain and simple metal cabin. Even Tang Wulin's cabin was only slightly more spacious than the other ones, housing a large table that discussions could be held around. Currently, all of the higher-ups of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy were gathered here. Looks like the Spirit Pagoda is determined to try more funny business. We should have taken out the Kyanqu family when we had the chance. Without the Kyanqu family, there's no way the Spirit Pagoda would have dared to do this. Cao Daja said in a cold voice. Tang Wulin sighed. Our hands were tied at the time. Under the current circumstances, we have to prioritize the defense of the continent first. However, we do need to be on our guard in case they try to disrupt us during the battle. Seeing as the ground units have been split up, what we have to be most cautious of is that they may not reinforce us when needed. Aside from that, I don't think there's too much we need to be wary of. After all, both divisions are attacking the same target, and they wouldn't dare to do anything too out of line given the gravity of the situation. Yali nodded in agreement. While that may be true, the prophylactic measures that we've taken are still warranted. Our sole mission is to protect Wulin during the battle, right? We just have to make sure we can do that. As long as all of us constantly remain by Wulin's side, they won't be able to do anything to us. Right at this moment, a voice that was very familiar to Tang Wulin rang out outside. Report, report. Come in, Tang Wulin prompted. A dashing female soldier strode in from outside. It was none other than Long Yakshu, whom Tang Wulin hadn't met for quite a long time. The two had separated once Long Yakshu and the others had returned to the Blood God Legion, and Tang Wulin was quite surprised to see her here now. Long Yakshu extended a military salute, then said, "The Blood Dragon Squad has come to make a report. We were ordered by our commander to come and assist you." She was speaking in a very official manner, but her eyes were brimming with excitement and were locked firmly on Tang Wulin's face. Tang Wulin was also very happy to see her. He had traveled to the Blood God Legion during the most difficult period of his life, and it was with the assistance of these friends that he had gradually rediscovered himself. The bond that he shared with those comrades were extremely deep-rooted, so Tang Wulin was naturally ecstatic to see her. "Take a seat, Yakshu. Did you and the others come as well?" Tang Wulin asked with a smile. Long Yakshu nodded in response. "The Blood Dragon Squad is here in full." "That's great. We were just having a meeting. Why don't you join us?" Thus, Long Yakshu sat down at the end of the table, but her gaze remained firmly fixed on Tang Wulin. None of the limit Douluo present were able to attract any attention from her. Tang Wulin continued. "During the attack that is to be initiated tomorrow, everyone from Shrek Academy will remain by my side. Senior Cao, Senior Zhang, I'll have to ask you to lead the Tang Sex battle squad. Regardless of what happens, we'll implement our original plan and constantly keep in touch." Cao Daja nodded in response. On a battlefield of this scale, all they could do was react to the unfolding situation. The battle squad was one of the Tang Sect's secret weapons. It was only comprised of 2,000 members, but all of them were elite members of the Tang Sect. In the wake of the Shrek City bombing, the Tang Sect had suffered heavy losses, but this battle squad had been training in secret outside of the Tang Sect the entire time, and it could be said that they were the most important core force of the Tang Sect. The fact that they had been deployed here to face the Abyssal Plane was a clear testament to just how seriously the Tang Sect was taking this battle. "Yakshu, you'll be responsible for facilitating communication so that we can contact the Central Legion at any time." "Yes." Long Yakshu rose to her feet again as she gave a respectful response. Tang Wulin smiled and said, "Sit down. This isn't the military. We don't have that many rules here." Long Yakshu smiled and sat back down, and her eyes were glowing as she continued to appraise Tang Wulin. Not long ago, he had served as a soldier under her. When they had first met, all she had felt was that he was very good looking. Yet after just a few years, he was already standing at the pinnacle of the Soulmaster world. After viewing the footage of Tang Wulin crushing Kyanqu Dongfang, Long Yakshu had been excited beyond belief. As a soldier who had lived her entire life in the military, she revered power above all else, and in her eyes, Tang Wulin was perfect. Thus, even though Dang Wuyu was also very exceptional, she simply couldn't bring herself to let go of Tang Wulin. She understood that as time passed, Tang Wulin was only getting further and further away from her, but she still couldn't help but love him. This was a type of feeling that was very difficult to put into words. After discussing some more details, the meeting was concluded. As everyone was going back to rest, Tang Wulin asked Long Yayu to stay behind after a brief hesitation. "Elder Long, I'll invite Elder Chen to stay over here with us. The secondary tree of life has absorbed an enormous amount of energy, and its rich aura will be beneficial to him as well," Tang Wulin suggested in a low voice. Long Yayu was silent for a moment before nodding in response. "All right, but don't tell him I know about this." "All right." Tang Wulin was quite amused, but he maintained a perfectly serious facade. Only following Long Yayu's departure did Tang Wulin allow himself a quick chuckle. Hopefully, Elder Long and Elder Chen would mend their relationship over the course of this battle. Thus, he and Long Yakshu were the only ones left in the room. "Do you have any instructions for me, General Tang?" Tang Wulin smiled and said, "Just refer to me by my name. I've abandoned my post as Major General long ago." Long Yakshu also smiled and said, "You seem to have lost weight." Tang Wulin lowered his head to look at himself. "I don't think so. It's probably just your imagination." Long Yakshu took a meaningful glance at him. "Perhaps. How have you been lately?" Tang Wulin replied, "I was doing great until these abyssal creatures showed up. This situation is different from the abyssal tides in the past, and truth be told, I think the military is being too optimistic. This is an unmissable opportunity for both the abyssal plane and the Holy Spirit cult, so they'll be sure to do everything in their power to devour our plane. Currently, we're still not even sure how much of their forces have descended upon our plane." Long Yakshu suddenly said, "You have too much on your shoulders. You need to give yourself some time to rest." Tang Wulin smiled and replied, "Not at all. I don't feel tired in the slightest. Perhaps this is what a sense of achievement feels like. I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me." Long Yakshu sighed. "No, you're not fine. We've been friends for so long. Do you think I can't tell? Whenever you think no one's looking, your eyes are always so empty and dejected. You seem to have sealed off your own heart to avoid experiencing further pain. Is this really good for you? Do you even know what true happiness is anymore? Perhaps if you allow yourself to open up a little, the world will also open up to you in kind." Tang Wulin shuddered slightly upon hearing this. He didn't think that Long Yakshu would be this deceptive. Indeed, he had already sealed off his own heart. Chapter 1778, Preparation for the Battle. He had entered this state of mind following his defeat to Gu Yuna during the Joust for a spouse event. From that time, he knew that there would be no way for him and Gu Yuna to be together in the short term. He didn't know why Gu Yuna was doing this despite the fact that she clearly loved him, but he could sense that no matter what he did, there was no way he would be able to convince her to return to his side for now. This was simply far too painful and cruel for him to bear, so he had constantly been subconsciously rejecting this reality. There were too many things that he had to take care of, including his own cultivation, management of Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect, dealing with the Spirit Pagoda, dealing with the military. All of this required his attention and effort, and he had no time to waste on personal matters. Besides, he didn't know what he was supposed to do anyway. Gu Yuna wasn't going to come back voluntarily, and that led to a subconscious and perhaps irrational urge to become even more powerful. Perhaps only once he became sufficiently powerful would he be able to bring her back. So he had always been striding toward the pinnacle. At the same time, he could tell that Gu Yuna was also making rapid improvements. His only hope was that someday, when both of them stood at the very pinnacle of this world, no one would be able to stop them from being together. He had several theories pertaining to Gu Yuna's identity, and he could only hope that the worst of those theories wasn't the correct one. Long Yakshu's words had struck a chord deep in Tang Wulin's heart, and a dejected look quickly appeared in his eyes. Long Yakshu's heart jolted slightly upon hearing this. This was the first time that she had ever seen Tang Wulin like this. He had been acting completely normal just a moment ago, yet he now seemed completely broken and lost. Was this still the same Tang Sect master and Sea God's Pavilion master who had held himself with so much composure in the face of so many limit Douluo? "I'm sorry, Wulin. Are you all right?" Long Yakshu hurriedly asked. Tang Wuling shook his head as a hint of clarity returned to his eyes, and a wry smile appeared on his face. You really are very observant. As you can see, if I allow myself to open up, I won't be embracing happiness. I'll only be releasing all of the negative emotions I've been repressing this entire time. Do you really think this is a good mental state for me to be in? Long Yakshu fell silent upon hearing this. She didn't know what to say to console Tang Wuling. After a long while, she finally said, You're being way too hard on yourself. My only hope is for you to be happy. Can you do that for me? Perhaps we'll never be together. You don't have any room in your heart for me, but I'll be satisfied as long as you're happy. Tang Wuling sighed. Why are you putting yourself through this? You silly girl. I'm not a good match for you. I'm someone who enjoys a quiet life the most. Before I turned 6, I was constantly by my parents' side, living a life with no worries or concerns. From 6 years of age, I began to study forging. Even though the days were very long and grueling, I had a target to work toward as I had an adorable little sister by my side. After that, I went away to study, and my parents suddenly disappeared. At the time, they had most likely been abducted by the Holy Spirit cult or the Spirit Pagoda, and all of a sudden, I had no family. It was her and my friends who had always been by my side throughout my youth. That was the most depressing period of my life, and she was the one who ensured that I remained grounded despite not knowing my place in the world. She was like a seed that had been planted into my heart, and before I knew it, that seed had grown into a massive tree. Who is she? Is she the one who saved you during that abyssal tide? Long Yakshu asked. Tang Wuling nodded in response. She saved me more times than I can count. I don't know why she can't be with me, but I know that we only have room for each other in our hearts. That's the final shred of hope that I'm clinging onto. After this battle, I'll put an end to all of this. I'll bring her back to my side no matter what. Long Yakshu nodded in a slightly sullen manner. I'm really envious of her. How I wish I was the one who had planted that seed. Looks like I simply came around too late. A smile appeared on her face as she spoke, and it was slightly bitter, but also seemed to allow her to come to terms with some things. Just as Tang Wuling was about to say something, Long Yakshu suddenly asked, Can I hug you? Just this once? Before Tang Wuling had a chance to reply, she quickly stepped forward and wound her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek tightly against his chest. Tang Wuling was struck by a reflexive urge to push her away, but she could feel her body trembling slightly, as well as a hint of moisture on his chest. He heaved a full-on internal sigh and couldn't bring himself to push her away in the end. Instead, he gently stroked her long hair in a consoling gesture. After a full minute had passed, Long Yakshu seemed to have finally worked up the courage to release him from her embrace. Thank you. That puts an end to my one-sided first love. Can we still be friends in the future? Long Yakshu was putting on a brave smile, but her eyes were still slightly red, and the smile was also rather strange. Of course, we'll always be friends, Tang Wuling replied in a firm voice. All right, I'm going now. Look after yourself. Tang Wuling nodded in response. You should all move into the nearby barracks. The aura of the secondary tree of life will be very beneficial to your cultivation and for improving your physical constitution. If you're lucky, perhaps your martial soul could even undergo a positive mutation. All right, thank you. Long Yakshu seemed to have already returned to normal, and she extended a military salute toward Tang Wuling before departing. Tang Wuling heaved an internal sigh of relief at the sight of her departing figure. If she really had let go of him in her heart, then that would be for the best. After all, he couldn't give her anything, and he was afraid to hurt her, so it was ideal that he was able to make her understand the situation through relatively tactful means. Unbeknownst to him, in the instant that Long Yakshu walked out of his cabin, the tears came flowing uncontrollably down her face. Despite this, there was a smile of absolute determination on her face. You're a stubborn mule, but unfortunately, I'm just as stubborn as you are. The entire human army had already sprung into action, and the orders issued from the meeting were being carried out. At this point, over 700,000 troops had already gathered on the northern front, including over 400,000 ground units and close to 200,000 troops stationed on the 3 naval legions. This was primarily because the foot soldiers of the 3 naval legions had already arrived on land to further bolster the ground units. The ground units comprised the main firepower for this battle, and the naval legions were primarily there to lock down coastline and assist the ground units with long-range fire. All of the preparatory work was complete by the next morning, upon which the leaders of the military and major soulmaster organizations gathered once again in the conference hall. After reports of all of the preparatory work were made, all that was left was to wait until the commencement of the attack. A faint yet determined smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. He had to give it his all in this battle. Due to the rejection of the plane, the Holy Lord most likely hadn't descended upon the continent yet. Otherwise, as the son of nature and the one chosen by the plane, he would definitely be able to sense it if a godly being had arrived on the plane. He was hoping that the Holy Lord would never be able to descend upon this plane. It appeared that the rejection of the Douluo plane was still considerably effective against the abyssal plane, but it was unclear how many abyssal emperors and sovereigns had already arrived. Chapter 1779, Deployment of Air Force Units. There was definitely more than just the Black Sovereign. Currently, the key was to see just how effective modern weaponry would be against abyssal creatures. Around half an hour before noon, Ogwanzi suddenly opened his eyes as he said in the commander's seat, then yelled, Deploy the scout robots. With that order issued, the battle finally commenced. Thousands of scout robots of all descriptions were instantly deployed, rushing toward the abyssal army. There were several dozens of large screens in the control center, and all of them adopted the first-person perspective of the scout drones as they flew rapidly toward the core circle of the northernmost region. Everyone's attention was focused on the robots as they looked on with serious expressions, and the vast majority of robots were advancing very quickly, with the exception of those that were burrowing into the ground. All departments get into position and get ready to depart. Make sure to maintain communication over the designated soul communication channel. The time for the final battle is upon us. I wish everyone the best of luck. Ogwanzi declared. All of the leaders in the conference hall quickly departed, carrying soul communicators that were connected to military audiovisual equipment, allowing them to see the footage being captured by the scout robots. Even for federal soldiers, this was the first time they had ever participated in a battle of this scale, let alone the major soulmaster organizations. After all, when had the 8 major legions ever acted as one? An army of such a grand scale hadn't been assembled even in preparation for the invasion of the other 2 continents. In around 2 more days, the Southern Legion was going to arrive, and the army would be fully assembled. Tang Wuling and the others returned to the encampment near the secondary tree of life, and were currently paying close attention to the footage being broadcast by the scout soul tools up ahead. The northernmost region was still a world covered in snow and ice, with freezing temperatures, fierce winds, and unforgiving conditions that made the region completely inhabitable to normal humans. Even in terms of soul beasts, there were only very few that had great affinity with snow and ice that could reside here. The perspective of the footage was constantly switching to different soul tools, and around 10 minutes later, the scout soul tool flying at the very forefront finally discovered the first signs of abyssal creatures. A 4-clawed bat was flying through the air, and it seemed to have immediately noticed the scout soul tool, upon which it flew directly toward the soul tool. The scout soul tool was extremely fast and agile, instantly swiveling around to flee the scene like a miniature soul aircraft. These soul tools were all remote controlled from afar and were far more agile than actual piloted aircraft. However, the 4-clawed bat suddenly let loose a sharp screech, releasing a burst of invisible sound waves that caused the scout soul tool to plummet rapidly out of the sky. The 4-clawed bat then pounced onto the soul tool like lightning and destroyed it with a single claw strike. That looks like a sound wave attack. All 4-clawed bats and 6-clawed bats possess this ability. Cowdadger remarked. Having faced abyssal creatures on so many past occasions, he naturally had a very thorough understanding of their abilities. There was a huge number of 4-clawed bats and 6-clawed bats in the abyssal plane, and they weren't very powerful in battle, but they had outstanding scouting skills with sound wave abilities that allowed for both offense and defense. The scout soul tool was very fast, but it couldn't outrun sound waves, and it didn't possess sufficient resistance against sound wave attacks, so it was instantly felled. Immediately thereafter, more and more scout soul tools began to appear, but more 4-clawed bats and 6-clawed bats also emerged to meet them. They were spread out in a very large area, keeping all scout efforts at bay. None of the scout soul tools were able to withstand the sound wave attacks, and large numbers of them quickly began to fall out of the sky. Similar situations had happened in the past, but the federal military had never deployed this many scout soul tools at once. The scout soul tools that were burrowing along underground would still take some more time to arrive on the front lines. At the control center, Ogwanzi issued an order through the public channel. Deploy the 1st Air Regiment to conduct reconnaissance by fire. Everyone's heart stirred slightly upon hearing the term reconnaissance by fire. Essentially, the 1st Air Regiment was putting their lives on the line to scout for the enemy's location through active fire. At this point, Dong Xian had already returned to the control center of his Western Legion, and his eyes narrowed slightly upon hearing this order. Looks like Guanzi isn't completely shameless. Kaiangyu Dongfang was standing right beside him. Hopefully a positive outcome arises from this. Dong Xian turned to him and said, I know what you're thinking about, but everything has to be built upon the foundation of securing victory in this battle. Kaiangyu Dongfang nodded in response, but the cold look in his eyes didn't abate in the slightest. Many methods had been used to try and revitalize that disabled arm of his, but all to no avail, and that was a clear testament to the Golden Dragon Spear's power. He harbored nothing but seething hatred for Tang Wulin. Unbeknownst to anyone else, he had received a message from Ghost Emperor through a special soul communication channel just the night before. A piercing shriek rang out as a series of Silver Soul aircrafts with the Federation's insignia imprinted upon them sped through the air, flying rapidly toward the core circle of the northernmost region. Each air regiment was comprised of around 50 fighter aircrafts, and this was generally consistent across all regions. Battle aircrafts were the most expensive war machines for the Federal military, and even the Central Legion only had around 500 such aircrafts. This was already the most out of any legion. Fighter aircrafts weren't as versatile as mechas, but they were far superior in speed. Of course, that speed advantage didn't hold true in comparison to divine grade mechas. In the military, purple mechas were the highest caliber of standard mechas that were distributed. All mechas above that level were personally owned by their pilots, so it would be unfair to compare them with the fighter aircrafts. At this moment, 50 fighter aircrafts were speeding through the air, and the field of view on the footage being broadcast was quickly widening, while the vantage point was also rising to a higher altitude, allowing everyone to see further ahead. The fighter aircrafts were extremely fast, and through optimal acceleration, they quickly broke through the sound barrier. Guanzi wore a grim expression as he looked on with tightly clenched fists. The 1st Air Regiment was comprised of the best fighter aircraft pilots the Central Legion had to offer. It was a part of the Legion's very core. Only the most important of missions were assigned to the 1st Air Regiment, and it had never disappointed him before. As the commander-in-chief in such a massive battle, Guanzi knew that he had to lead by example. If he weren't even willing to risk his best troops, how could he expect others to do that? Of course, he didn't want to send his troops to their deaths, so he immediately chose to deploy his strongest air regiment in the hope that this would minimize casualties. These 50 fighter aircrafts were the most cutting-edge aircrafts that the Federation currently had to offer, and all of them were fitted with the most advanced radar and anti-jamming technology. Upon departing from the barracks, the aircrafts immediately split up with 2 aircrafts per group. Normally, in a group of 2 fighter aircrafts, there would be a lead aircraft and a wing aircraft. As the name implied, the lead aircraft led the way, and it was also responsible for attacking the enemy, while the wing aircraft acted as the lead aircraft's guardian and lookout. If the 2 aircrafts could cooperate effectively, then they would be able to execute many battle techniques. It wasn't always the case that a group was comprised of 2 fighter aircrafts, but the lower the number of aircrafts in a group, the more skilled the pilots in the group were implied to be. Chapter 1780, Fearsome Hornet Swarm. During a mission, the group with the least aircrafts would be the group most adept at completing the mission. 2 aircrafts was the minimum number in a group, and the 2 would look after one another like a single entity. The 50 aircrafts of the 1st Air Regiment formed 25 groups that sped toward different coordinates, and that was already a clear reflection of their abilities. Even though Dong Xian was extremely averse to conceding inferiority to Guanzi in any aspect, he still couldn't help but give a nod of approval upon seeing this. The 1st Air Regiment was one of Guanzi's most prized truck cards, and it was a truly formidable force. As the aircrafts fanned out, the field of view began to widen massively. Having already broken through the sound barrier, these aircrafts were flying far faster than the Scout Soul tools, and they quickly began to approach the core circle of the northernmost region. Their arrival was obviously noticed by the bats, and at this point, the aircrafts were already flying at altitudes of over 3,000 meters. 4 clawed bats couldn't reach such a high altitude. Only the 6 clawed bats were able to quickly rise up to meet the aircrafts. The first group of the 1st Air Regiment discovered the 6 clawed bats up ahead first, and there were over 10 huge 6 clawed bats converging toward them from all directions. Soundwave attacks were unleashed to encompass this entire area in an attempt to disrupt the equipment on the aircrafts, but the cutting-edge anti-jamming technology thwarted those attempts. The 2 aircrafts of the first group made no attempt to evade the 6 clawed bats, flying directly toward them. Just as the 2 aircrafts were approaching the bats, 2 laser beams shot out from under the belly of the lead aircrafts. The laser beams immediately began to extend toward either side, and they were followed by another 2 laser beams, then 2 more yet again. The 6 laser cannons beneath the aircraft were firing in waves at the 6 clawed bats up ahead. The largest one of the 6 clawed bats folded its wings together like a shield while positioning itself in front of all of its brethren. A string of dull thumps rang out, and the 6 laser beams tore 6 holes into its wings amid an agonized screech. However, the other 6 clawed bats were already pouncing toward the pair of fighter aircrafts. Right at this moment, the 2 aircrafts performed an astonishing maneuver. The lead aircraft suddenly decelerated drastically, even pausing for a clear moment in midair. Immediately thereafter, the tip of the aircraft reared up as it performed a cobra maneuver, launching itself up into the sky like a rocket. At the same time, a faint green light barrier appeared around the aircraft. The wing aircraft had already decelerated along with the lead aircraft, and it seemed to have been drawn toward the green light barrier, orbiting in a tight circle around the lead aircraft. At the same time, a speck of red light could be seen shimmering on the front tip of the wing aircraft. There were no soul lasers being fired, but the red light was flashing rapidly. The surrounding 6 clawed bats were just about to pounce toward the 2 aircrafts again, but all of a sudden, they stiffened on the spot before falling out of the sky, exploding into clouds of grey mist in midair. All of the soldiers who witnessed this let loose rousing cheers upon seeing this. These 2 aircraft pilots were truly among the cream of the crop to have made into the first group of the 1st Air Regiment. The maneuver they had just executed was extremely difficult to pull off in battle, especially when surrounded. After all of the 6 clawed bats were killed, the green light barrier around the lead aircraft vanished, thereby releasing the wing aircraft, which immediately swiveled around before following the lead aircraft on an ascent to a higher altitude. The 2 aircrafts reached an altitude of over 7,000 meters in the blink of an eye, and that was too high even for 6 clawed bats to reach them. After that, the 2 aircraft swiveled around and descended on a nosedive as if they were in freefall while red light was flashing rapidly on their front tips. While in midair, they were constantly making minute changes in directions, but were able to target one 6 clawed bat after another with unerring accuracy. All of the 6 clawed bats in their wake quickly plummeted out of the sky before exploding in midair, and it quickly became apparent that both the fighter aircrafts were fitted with heavy iron laser guns. Only this type of weapon could be so ruthlessly efficient and completely disregard the defensive prowess of the 6 clawed bats. Similar scenes were unfolding in various different directions, and the 6 clawed bats were no match for the elite 1st Air Regiment. In the face of their exceptional speed, dexterity, and offensive efficiency, one 6 clawed bat after another was being reduced to grey mist, which was surging toward a certain direction. It was clear that the abyssal passageway lied in that direction. A faint smile appeared on Guanzi's face as he watched things unfold in the control center. Through this splendid display, the 1st Air Regiment was proving that he had been right to invest so much military fund into their training and development. However, his smile quickly turned into an expression of concern as he discovered what appeared to be a dark cloud approaching from the distance. There was no way that it was an actual cloud, as no cloud could possibly move that quickly. Instead, it looked like a sandstorm. The closest lead aircraft immediately zoomed in on the dark cloud to get a clearer image, and all of the people in the control center drew a sharp breath at the sight of exactly what this dark cloud was. This wasn't a cloud or a sandstorm at all. It was a mass comprised of countless fist-sized hornet-like creatures. All of them had inky black bodies that were glistening with a metallic sheen, and each had 6 very small cicada-like wings on their backs. The swarm was flying extremely quickly while emitting a faint buzzing sound, and Guanzi immediately turned toward Zhang Guanyun. What the hell are those things? As a general who had extensive experience in battling abyssal creatures, Zhang Guanyun had been assigned the role of vice commander to assist Guanzi. Zhang Guanyun replied in an urgent manner, "This is a new type of abyssal creature that I've never seen at the Blood God Legion. I suggest we get the 1st Air Regiment to come back right away as a safety precaution and attack from afar." Guanzi knew that there was no time to hesitate, and he immediately ordered, "1st Air Regiment, retreat immediately. 1st defensive line, fire your long-range cannons and soul lasers to cover the 1st Air Regiment." Upon receiving this order, one massive cannon barrel after another extended out of the 1st defensive line, quickly changing direction according to the coordinates transmitted back to them by the 1st Air Regiment. Immediately thereafter, a string of loud booms rang out as thousands thousands of laser beams shot forth into the distance. At the same time, the 1st Air Regiment immediately heeded the retreat order, and the 25 pairs of fighter aircrafts flew through the air in a series of beautiful arcs as they swiveled back around. However, right at this moment, the hornet-like abyssal creatures flying at the very front of the swarm began to display some changes. From the footage being captured by the 1st Air Regiment, it could be seen that the wings of these hornet-like creatures had begun to glow with green light. In fact, their wings were quickly disintegrating into this green light, but at the same time, their speed received a tremendous boost, allowing them to break the sound barrier almost instantaneously. Meanwhile, the 1st Air Regiment had only just swiveled around, and there was no way they could break the sound barrier so quickly. Thus, the entire Air Regiment was instantly inundated by the giant hornets that had sped up under the effect of the green light. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.